The hardest thing is watching somebody that you love suffer.
I'm dying. It's a fact. There's no need for a doctor to tell me. That farewell performance was something I insisted on doing.
There's a certain kind of silence that follows the death of someone like Ozzy Osbourne, a silence that isn't really quiet at all. It hums underneath everything, a buzzing ache, not the hush before a storm, but the one after it's passed. You could feel it on the day the news broke. Social media flooded with tributes, headlines screamed of the loss, fans dug up old performances, interviews, memories. But through all of that noise, there was a space, an empty space. Kelly Osbourne hadn't said a word. It's strange, isn't it, how we wait for certain voices, though not because they're famous, but because we know that their grief carries weight. We want to hear from the daughter, not the celebrity. We want to know what it feels like when the man the world called a legend was just dead. And yet she stayed silent. And in that silence, people wondered, was she heartbroken beyond words? Was she holding back a storm of feeling too raw for public eyes? There's something sacred about the first response of someone closest to the loss.
Baby, she's my baby. I love her so.
It's not just about what's said, it's about when it's said, how it's said, and what kind of truth it dares to reveal. Kelly's silence wasn't absence. It was weight. Her silence said something. It gave us permission to feel the confusion, the suddenness, the lack of control we all experience when someone we thought was eternal is suddenly gone. We all thought Ozzy would somehow live forever, didn't we? Because that's what happens with icons. With icons, they take on this mythic quality. We stop imagining them as fragile. But the truth is, Kelly always saw the fragility. She saw the bad days, the hospital visits, the slow walks, the long silences in between his jokes. She saw him not just as the Prince of Darkness, but as a man, one she had loved since she was a child, through every tour, every scandal, every private conversation we'll never hear. So when the world waited for her to speak, maybe we forgot she wasn't preparing a statement. She was mourning.
Good morning.
Is that me? Good morning. That's Dad.
Dada.
Dad.
Say good morning.
Good morning.
A father. Or song. She was living inside the memory, not narrating it. Grief doesn't move at the speed of headlines, and the deeper the bond, the slower the voice returns. When she finally did speak, it wasn't with paragraphs, it was with a lyric. A song they once sang together in a moment that now seems unbearably full of foreshadowing.
I lost the best friend.
Daughter lost her father, and in the world's rush to turn his death into a story, her silence reminded us that grief isn't content. It's not a post. It's not a trend, it's a private ache that echoes through public rooms. And for a while, all she could do was listen to that echo and let it fill the space where words should have been. To the world, he was the Prince of Darkness, a stage-destroying force, a madman, a metal icon. But to Kelly, he was simply Dad. Not the Ozzy Osbourne of magazine covers and sold-out arenas, but the man who danced with her in the kitchen when no one was watching. It's easy to forget that icons are human, that they have routines, nicknames, soft moments. For Kelly, Ozzy wasn't just a rock star. He was her constant, her compass, the gentle voice that called her a my little girl long after she'd grown up. She trained up. There's a moment frozen in time that speaks volumes. The duet they recorded together in 2003, a reimagined version of Black Sabbath's A Changes. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't loud, it was quiet, vulnerable, raw, and maybe that's why it struck such a chord. It wasn't just a father and daughter singing, it was a rare window into their emotional world. You could hear it in her voice, the way she leaned into his, not as a performer trying to match him, but as a daughter matching his rhythm, his heart. It reached #1 in the UK, but its real value was private. It was a musical conversation between two people who knew each other better than anyone else ever could. She had a nickname for him, silly, affectionate, completely un-rockstar-like. She called him a Papa Bear, and he loved it. It was their little language, their reminder that no matter how loud the world got, they had their own frequency. She would tease him about his slippers, help him with his phone, laugh when he forgot how to spell Instagram. And in those moments, he wasn't Ozzy. He was just her dad, fragile, goofy, full of stories that always ended with a laugh and a raised eyebrow. These are the things we never saw, the rituals we weren't supposed to see, their Saturday morning calls, the shared tea in silence, the texts that said nothing and everything. And the irony is, Kelly probably never realized how extraordinary it all was, because when you grow up with love like that, it just feels normal. But now, in the wake of his absence, every one of those moments glows like stained glass, mundane at the time, priceless now. It's hard for the world to separate the myth from the man. For Kelly, it was never a question. She saw both, she held both, she loved both, and now, in the strange new silence, she carries both. The legacy of Ozzy Osbourne belongs to the world. But the quiet, tender man behind the curtain? There's a video, just a few seconds long, that Kelly Osbourne now holds like a fragile piece of glass. It wasn't planned, it wasn't staged, it wasn't meant to be a final anything. But now it plays like a soft goodbye. In it, Ozzy is seated at the kitchen table in their Buckinghamshire home. Oh, the morning light is gentle, stretching across a surface cluttered with newspapers. He's wearing headphones, eyes focused on a tablet, half present in whatever world he was exploring. And then, from behind the camera, Kelly's voice. Good morning. Ozzy looks up, surprised but smiling.
Good morning.
Is that me? Good morning. That's Dad.
Dada.
That's
Say good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, he says warmly in that unmistakable voice that somehow always carried mischief and music, even in its calmest tones. At first glance, it's unremarkable. A quiet breakfast, a passing moment, no spotlight, no guitar, no fanfare. But that's exactly why it cuts so deep now. Because sometimes what you think is ordinary ends up being the last sacred thing you ever get. This wasn't a farewell, it was life continuing, unaware it was nearing a cliff. The kind of moment that never registers as important until time comes back to underline it over and over again. Kelly didn't know this would be the last time she filmed her father. But now it's etched into her memory like a final signature. There's something brutal about realizing the last time already happened. We imagine endings will come with closure, maybe ceremony, but real life rarely offers that. Sometimes the last chapter doesn't announce itself, it just passes. And later, when you go back to reread it, you see what you missed. That's what this video has become for Kelly. A mirror she didn't know she was holding, now reflecting everything she'll never get to say again. It's a strange kind of peace wrapped in ache, a moment so soft it almost vanishes when you look straight at it, yet it lingers with devastating clarity. The most haunting thing is how normal it all was. Ozzy wasn't in bed. He wasn't sick.
I'm dying. It's a fact. There's no need for a doctor to tell me. That farewell performance was something I insisted on doing. I don't want to disappear silently. I have to...
Present, tapping through his tablet like he always did. Kelly was smiling. Her son was in the room. The world hadn't changed yet. And maybe that's the hardest part, because when loss finally arrives, it doesn't just steal the future. It changes the past. It turns simple mornings into relics. It rewrites breakfast into a monument. Now that clip lives in Kelly's phone and probably in her dreams. She watches it not for what was said, but for what it held, the everyday tenderness of a father and daughter still orbiting each other's lives. And as viewers, we feel that ache too, not just for Ozzy, but for all the moments in our own lives that passed by quietly, never knowing they were about to become memorable. For days, Kelly Osbourne said nothing. While the world flooded timelines with tributes, rare photos, and old concert footage, she remained silent. Not out of avoidance, not out of neglect, but because there are certain wounds that language simply can't touch. She opened her phone 100 times. Typed, deleted, typed again. There's something cruel about trying to shrink a lifetime of love, memory, and heartbreak into a box meant for 280 characters. How do you explain the quiet gravity of losing the one man whose voice was always louder than the chaos around him? How do you speak when grief has taken your breath? Eventually she posted just a few lines, but not hers. They were lyrics, familiar ones, from It Changes, the haunting duet she recorded with her father decades earlier. I'm going through changes, it read, no explanation, no quote, no eulogy. Just the same chorus that once echoed through a studio when she was still young and Ozzy was still laughing. Back then, it was just a song. Now it was something else entirely, a final echo, a mirror held up to her sorrow saying the words she couldn't shape on her own. And that choice, letting the lyrics speak, said more than any paragraph ever could, because sometimes the deepest love shows itself not in what we say, but in what we allow to be felt. Kelly didn't need to explain. She didn't need to write pages. She didn't need to be strong for the internet. For herself, and the reality was this: she was breaking quietly, and instead of dressing that up in performative grief or curated memories, she offered the rawest thing she could, a line from a song and a heart emoji. That heart, small and red, became the final punctuation. It didn't try to summarize, it didn't soften the blow, it just sat there silent, full and aching. We've all been there, haven't we? Trying to find the right thing to say when there is no right thing, wanting to scream and collapse at the same time. Searching for someone else's words to carry what ours can't. In that moment, Kelly wasn't the daughter of a legend. She was just someone who had lost their father and couldn't speak without falling apart. The internet moved fast, as it always does. Screenshotted, shared, circulated. But few stopped to see the depth underneath that simplicity. This wasn't just a tribute, it was a surrender. A white flag to the fact that grief had no script and that sometimes silence paired with song says everything. In a world that demands commentary, Kelly chose feeling. And for anyone who's ever been left speechless by love or loss, that choice rang true. Not dramatic, not poetic, just human. And in that humanity, she reminded the world. Even when legends fall, their daughters still grieve like the rest of us, one broken lyric at a time. In the shadow of global tributes and headlines, there were voices that remained softer, more private, but no less broken. Ozzy Osbourne wasn't just the Prince of Darkness to his fans. To his sisters Jean and Gillian, he was simply John, their brother, their shared childhood, their protector. And when the news came, it wasn't just the end of a music era. It was the silence of a sibling bond that had stretched across decades, distance, and countless stages. In moments like these, grief narrows. It becomes intimate. And for Jean and Gillian, it resurfaced in one small, unfinished promise. Just a few days before he passed, Ozzy had texted Gillian, a short, hopeful message: "I'm going to come and see you soon." He was referring to Villa Park, the beloved home of their football club, Aston Villa. They used to go together when they were young. Standing in those crowded stands, their lives were ordinary then. No leather jackets, no screaming crowds, just siblings watching a game. And maybe that's why that message hit so hard. It wasn't a grand gesture or a cryptic farewell, kind you make when you assume there's always more time, but time, as it often does, ran out without warning. And now that text hangs in the air, painfully preserved. A sentence that will never lead to the reunion it imagined. And that's the cruelty, isn't it? Grief doesn't always strike at the loudest moment. Sometimes it arrives in the quiet reminders, the message bubble that will never light up again, the seat that stays empty, the memory that becomes heavier with every retelling. For Gillian, it was that text. For Jean, it was the way he used to call just to check in, just to say her name in that distinct Aussie drawl. Kelly's pain is deep, but it's not solitary. Her mourning is tangled in a wider web of family losing its axis. And this matters because in a world that saw Ozzy as a myth, his sisters held on to something more grounded. They knew the boy before the man before the myth. They watched the transformation, but they never let it swallow who he was to them. And when they grieve, it isn't for the icon. It's for the brother who used to steal extra biscuits, who cracked bad jokes, who once swore he'd take them back to a match. The Villa Park message lingers because it captured something rare. Ozzy reaching for his roots, his beginnings. And maybe he knew, or maybe he didn't. But in that simple plan to return, he gave his sisters one last glimpse of the boy he had always been. The promise remains unfulfilled, yes, but it speaks volumes that even in his final days, fame hadn't replaced family. That legacy at its core is measured not by albums sold, but by who we promise to come back to. There's something quietly revolutionary about the way Kelly Osbourne is choosing to remember her father. Not through tribute concerts, not through tearful documentaries, not even through media appearances. Through bedtime stories told to a son too young to understand the scale of the man his grandfather once was. In a world that often demands spectacle to prove devotion, Kelly's choice is almost defiant. Grief without display, love without noise. And perhaps that's the truest kind of homage. Each evening as she lowers her voice and cradles her son in her arms, she doesn't speak of the Ozzy the world saw on stage. Ozzy humming to himself in the garden, naming each plant like a character in his private fairy tale. These are the moments that don't trend, but they're the ones she clings to, because they're not just stories, they're blueprints. Small fragments of a man who, despite the chaos and the madness of his fame, loved in a way that was deeply human. Kelly knows the cameras will always favor the myth. But myths aren't what children inherit. They inherit tone of voice. They inherit tenderness. They inherit the pauses between words and the way a laugh can curve at the edges of a sentence. And in that way, Ozzy isn't gone. He's coded into the lullabies she sings, into the gentle correction when her son mispronounces a word, into the decision to sit down, be present, and not always rush. Grief for Kelly has become less of a wound and more of a thread, one she weaves into the future, one soft strand at a time. It doesn't look grand, but that's the point. There's immense power in the quiet. In choosing not to let grief consume the room, but instead to shape it into something softer, something survivable, and maybe even something beautiful. Because legacy isn't just what we leave behind, it's what others choose to carry forward. And Kelly is carrying the version of her father that few ever saw. The one who cried at animal rescue commercials, who doodled strange little drawings in the margins of his notebooks, who kissed her forehead before every trip, no matter how old she was. She's not preserving Ozzy Osbourne. She's preserving Dad. The dad who told her over and over that she was stronger than she thought. And now she's whispering that same truth to a new generation who may never hear the music, but who will feel the man in the most essential way. So when we talk about tribute, maybe it's not always about what gets televised. Maybe it's what gets whispered at night, passed down like heirloom wisdom. When the news broke, headlines around the world blazed with one message: the Prince of Darkness is gone. Tributes poured in from musicians, fans, and public figures alike. People remembered the stage dives, the TV chaos, the unforgettable growl of a voice that defined an era. They grieved the legend, the icon who tore up the rules and then rewrote them in eyeliner and blood. But behind those headlines, away from the press releases and playlists, there was a daughter. And that daughter wasn't mourning a rock god. She was mourning her best friend. Kelly Osbourne didn't just lose a father, she lost the one person who had known every version of her and loved her through them all. The man who held her tiny hand when the world felt too loud. The one who made her laugh when she wanted to scream, who called her a my girl in that low, gruff voice that somehow always sounded like safety. When she wrote, "I lost the best friend I ever had," it wasn't performance. It was the voice of a daughter stripped raw by reality, speaking not as a celebrity, but as a human being trying to steady herself after her world tilted forever. And that's the contrast that hurts the most. The world plays Ozzy's music louder now, as if volume could fill the silence. But for Kelly, there's no soundtrack strong enough to drown out the quiet ache of a missing morning phone call. No documentary montage can replace the instinct to text him about something stupid and funny. The public gets nostalgia. She gets absence. But maybe that's why her loss feels so universal. Because we've all had someone we weren't ready to say goodbye to. Someone whose memory plays not in grand scenes, but in tiny, irreplaceable gestures. The way they looked at you like you mattered when the rest of the world felt indifferent. That's what Kelly is grieving. And maybe somewhere in your story you are too. So today isn't just about Ozzy, the heavy metal titan. It's about Ozzy, the man who made people feel something, whether that was shock, laughter, rage, or in Kelly's case, unconditional love. And as this chapter closes, it's worth asking yourself, what moment with Ozzy still lingers in your memory? What lyric, what laugh, what wild moment caught you off guard and never quite left? Because grief doesn't ask us to forget. It asks us to carry forward what mattered. And in sharing those memories, those fragments of connection, we don't just remember the man. We become part of the legacy he left behind, not in noise, but in meaning. Tell us, what's your most unforgettable Ozzy memory?